exactly. That's what he's worried about, right?
The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have members of the State Senate and House of Delegates with us this morning. Marcus Simon from the House of Delegates. Good to see you, sir.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks again for having me.
Scott Surovell from the Senate.
Always good to be
Scott.
Here. Yeah, you too, Woody.
Couple of weeks into this short session, how are things going from your perspective?
It's been a pretty quiet session overall, I think, actually. We haven't had any big overall issues that have sort of dominated the session like we often have. But I can tell you, being in the Senate, trying to jam through all those bills and the amount of time we have is, you don't get a lot of time to talk or think or move. We're moving quick. And right now is really the crunch time. I mean, we're really hitting bills fast and hard right now. Every committee is doing about 20 or 30 a day, so in committee, in each committee.
Sure.
So, but it's going pretty well for me so far. I'm pretty satisfied with how things have gone so far.
Good. Delegate, how are they going for you in the House?
Well, as the Senator says, things move fast. A lot of the committees or subcommittees may only meet once a week, and we only have 3 weeks before crossover in a short session. It means you get
Now,
one.
what's crossover for those who don't understand that term?
Well, right, so we're in a 45-day session this year. It's a short session, which sounds like a small amount of time to begin with, but it's actually even shorter than that because each House has until about halfway, roughly the halfway mark of session, to finish their work on their bills and send it over to the other House. So crossover is that deadline. So when all the work on House bills has to be done and the House has to pass it out before crossover so it can get to the Senate. So they have their roughly 2.5, 3 weeks to work on it and before we can send it to the governor. So again, when a subcommittee meets once a week and they've got 40 or 50 bills on their docket, you got to do 25 and 25, and if you don't get it right the first time, it's not likely you're going to get a second bite at the apple. So things move quickly. You've got a lot to balance. I had on Monday, we have a 15 bill limit in the House because there's 100 of us, and we couldn't possibly do all the bills we'd had to do if we could introduce as many as we wanted. I had, I think, 6 of my 15 up on Monday. The good news is, I have less work to do now because they all died on Monday, and now I can move on to the other 6.
Yeah, so I got like 11 up today. So I mean, it's the kind of 11 is not a typical day, but when we don't have a limit like the House does. So, but I put in 40, but I have to go argue 11 of my pieces of legislation today, starting in about 20 minutes.
So what do you have up? Talk to us about some of that legislation you're going to be pursuing in committee today.
Today?
Yes.
Let's see, I have the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment at 8:30, along with 2 constitutional amendments. One is for 2-term governor. Third one is to take the requirement that you provide a full Social Security number out of the Constitution of Virginia, where it really shouldn't be. And then at 10:30, I have to be in Finance Committee. I have a tax exemption to expand the school sales tax holiday to include computers up to $700, so that families could actually buy a computer and save about $40 per computer if they bought a $700 computer. And then this afternoon, I've got 5 bills up in courts. So it's 5 bills in transportation and 3 in courts. So hands-free driving. I got 2 bike safety bills. Another bill to get rid of the obstructed view, make that a secondary offense. The Court of Appeals says if you have a parking pass hanging from your rearview mirror, the police can stop you. I don't like that. I think that ought to change. And then I got my, like I said, I got 3 bills in courts after that. decriminalization of adultery, and making child support a priority when people die, priority debt when people pass away, and there's a third one I can't remember right now.
That's a lot. Good luck. Good luck. Now I know you've had some bills, as you indicate, have failed, but talk about some of them. What about campaign finance and the use of excess funds?
So that's one that actually still churning away there. It's funny, you learn as a member of the minority party to read certain signals about when your bill might pass, and sometimes things in Richmond are a multi-year effort because our sessions are so short.
Sure.
I've been introducing a campaign finance, or rather excessive use of campaign finance, personal use. Campaign finance bill, every year that I've been down here. This is my 4th session. And this year, Mark Cole, who chairs the Privileges and Elections Committee on the Republican side, introduced a bill very similar to mine. So that's sort of a signal that, hey,
Yes.
the time might be right for something to come out. It may not be the bill that I introduced, but he and I will work together to take what works from my bill and what works from his bill and put that together.
He's the committee chairman, too.
Yeah, he's the committee
Yes,
chairman. So again,
yes.
when the chair of the committee that hears the issue puts in a bill with his name as the chief patron, that's a good sign that they really are getting serious about working on that. And it's, the governor talked about it in his State of the Commonwealth address. We've come a long way on ethics, and we've reduced the amount of gifts and fancy steak dinners we can accept and things like that. But we kind of left in this one loophole which says, I can't take a gift of more than $100, so I can't go out to a $250 lunch dinner. But what's happened, and we've seen this in some of these campaign finance reports, is you get a contribution from big company X. They take you out to dinner, and you reimburse them. So hey, I can't if I reimburse the gift giver, then it's not a gift. But you reimburse them out of your campaign account that they just donated $1,000 to, or $10,000 to in some cases. So we can't use your campaign fund as a way to circumvent the gift rules that we have. And I think that sort of putting that frame on it and helping people understand that that's what's happening has helped us get some progress there. And so I think that we'll have that. Now again, it may not be everything that I wanted out of that bill, but things also happen incrementally. And so sometimes you take what you can get now, and we'll come back in a year or two and try and beef it up a little bit.
It's interesting you mentioned how people in leadership positions can send signals. I understand that Delegate Steve Landis now has a bill or a resolution that would retain the authority of the General Assembly to redistrict, but would set up some type of objective criteria to determine the boundaries of state legislative districts.
So I guess there are 2 kinds of signals that you can send, and you got to be, again, sort of reading them is an art, right? I looked at the Landis bill and say, I think it's a false flag, let me put it that way, right? It says, hey, we're serious about redistricting, we care about it too, but if you really get down to it, it doesn't have a lot of teeth to it. Right. It says, hey, we won't be political in doing gerrymandering. Well, they can say that all they want, but what does that mean? What are the criteria? How do we decide if it's been influenced by politics or not? Does it just mean that the people that draw the lines have to say, I promise this wasn't influenced by politics or incumbent protection? So, is it a step in the right direction? I guess so. We start to put in some principles that we all agree are the right principles. But so sometimes it's a signal they're getting serious. Sometimes, again, I think it's just window dressing to make you think they're getting serious about a topic when there's further to go.
What about the premise there in terms of the General Assembly retaining the authority to draw those lines? I mean, most people would rather see an independent bipartisan commission make those determinations.
Yeah, there's actually a couple different alternatives. One's bipartisan, another one's nonpartisan. I think nonpartisan is probably the way to go myself instead of having anybody political at the table. But to do a real change, it would require a change to our Constitution. And that would require us to pass a constitutional amendment this year and next year, identical amendments, and then it would have to be passed on by the voters in at this point, 18, I guess. Yeah. I've supported nonpartisan redistricting all 8 years I've been down here, and I haven't met many constituents that think that we ought to be drawing any lines for ourselves. So we need to go there.
What about this move? One of your colleagues in the Senate, along with one of your colleagues in the House, formed a transparency caucus last year, calling for, especially on the House side, I believe, for more transparency in terms of subcommittee hearings, recorded votes. I think the rules in the Senate are a little different, however.
Yeah, no, I mean, everybody's for transparency, I think. Say they are. Whether they back it up with their votes, it's a whole different story. But one of the bills I've put in before, didn't do this year, required every committee hearing to be recorded and an archived video put online. And I've actually been talking with the clerk of the Senate and others in the House about making sure their people are focused on our new General Assembly building. This building we're in right now
Yes.
is going to close down in about 3 or 4 months, and they're going to kick us out, tear it down, rebuild it. And it's critical that our new building be constructed with both recording for audio and visual recording in all of our committee hearings, so that we can actually live stream video back at home, so people don't have to drive to Richmond to see what we're doing in committee hearings, or people can sit in their office here in Richmond and watch instead of having to come down to the hearing. Everything can be recorded, digitized, archived. One of the excuses I always got was that the technology cost was high, but if we can build into the building really cheap at the front end, all we have to pay for is the software licensing on the back end, and I think there's actually interest in doing that. But yeah, in the House, they don't actually record their votes on a lot of bills. In the Senate, we record every single vote on every single vote we take to kill or pass or anything is recorded, and I think that's how it should be, but the House kind of operates differently. So.
And you've been very active in terms of freedom of information.
Yep.
I know over the past few years, what's going on in that arena now?
Yeah, last year we passed a huge bill on FOIA. The Supreme Court came down with an opinion. It's actually a case I was involved in, which sort of gutted FOIA in a lot of ways, and we passed legislation that kind of restored it. This year I've got a couple FOIA bills that are out there. I argued actually 2 of them, I think. 2 of them yesterday. One of them, I'm trying to remember exactly what they do.
That's all right. Go
Increased
ahead.
transparency, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, they did. They did. But God, what did they do? They're on your. You give me the list really quick. I can tell you.
Sure.
Oh yeah, one of them allows family members to get records in the event of suicides, unattended deaths. Right now, the police department is not required to turn over records when somebody is either found dead in a home or they've committed suicide. And a lot of family members would like to get those records for closure, and a lot of police departments won't provide them because they don't want to be second-guessed, and they just don't think they should have to provide them. And I think that's wrong. That bill actually passed unanimously. And secondly, I passed a bill to make it easier, or to actually require local governments to be more careful when they have closed meetings. I think there's a lot of bad things that happen in closed meetings, and when a local government comes out of a closed meeting, they're required to certify that they only talked about the things they told us they were going to talk about when they go into the closed meeting. And I've heard, never been in a closed meeting myself, but I've heard that often they stray and they'll talk about other things, and then they come out and pretend like they didn't talk about anything different. My bill basically would say that if you vote to certify a closed meeting, you vote to certify to the public that you only talked about what you promised you're going to talk about, and you're wrong, you actually talked about something else, then a court could fine you $500 individually, personally, for every time you violate that. That bill did not get a favorable recommendation, actually died in committee, but I'm going to bring back a different version of that next year. So, and we actually have 3 FOIA bills up in 10 minutes as soon as I leave here on the FOIA subcommittee I'm on, having to do with there's this fracking that's going. Fracking is basically they shoot all these chemicals underground and it gets in the groundwater and create natural gas, and the fracking companies want all their chemicals they shoot in the ground to be secret. I'm about to go upstairs and hopefully fight that, but we'll see what happens.
Great. Student loans. I know you've got something going with regard to student loans.
Yeah, so we did, again, this is the second year of a multi-year effort on that. Introduced a bill to create a Virginia Student Loan Authority in Virginia and allow folks to refinance their existing student debt. Just like when your mortgage payments get too high and rates come down, you can refinance. You still pay back the principal, but you can do it on your current market terms and lower your monthly payment, which stimulates the economy, frees up money to buy cars and groceries and do other things. Right now, we have $300 billion in student loan debt in Virginia.
In Virginia alone.
Yeah, so $1.3 trillion across the country. So it's a huge problem. About 600,000 Virginia students would benefit if they could, financially, if they could refinance their loans. Unfortunately, the House Appropriations Committee said that we don't have the money to invest in the startup of something like that right now. And then they also sort of thought that some of these students should have known better than to take out loans that couldn't be refinanced, which I hope will lead us to some more favorable recommendations on my second piece, which is a student loan bill of rights bill. So we're going to create we're going to start licensing student loan servicers and originators. What we found from a lot of these folks that are suffering with a lot of student debt now is they didn't have any idea what they were getting themselves into. You show up at the, you get into school, you show up at the bursar's office, they're like, look, don't worry, we've got a way to get you in. We'll find the money. You worry about going and being a student. We'll take care of this. Just sign here, and we'll make sure there's plenty of money. You'll pay it back later. And once you graduate, you'll be filthy rich. You'll have more money than you know what to do with it. You won't have to worry about it. Didn't always turn out to be the case. And so we're going to have to put license them, limit what they can tell you, how they have to disclose what your payments are going to be. Also some of these collection practices are really harsh for student lenders. And we hear stories about one particular student who graduated, never got a bill. They didn't send a bill or a statement. They didn't try and keep track of her or where she was. And by the time they finally found out where she'd gone after she left school, she was in default. She had all these late payments and late fees and penalties, and so she's out of school. She's got all this debt, and her credit's ruined. Before she's even had a chance to get started. So hopefully we can crack down on some of those abusive practices, and have the State Corporation Commission and other licensing folks hold student lenders accountable for what they're doing.
And of course, those kinds of loans have migrated to the internet, predatory online loans. I think you've got some legislation dealing with that too.
Yeah, we passed the bill off the floor of the Senate yesterday to regulate internet lenders. Predatory lending is a huge problem in the 36th district, all up and down Route 1. We have the car title lender problem that's been going on now since 2009. But there are now companies there's actually two things. There's Native American Indian tribes that are using their sovereign immunity that they sort of lend it out to these other companies to then lend money to people over the internet and then claim that you can't sue them because they're a sovereign nation. Then there's companies in other countries that are making loans in Virginia, and they're lending money to people at documented interest rates of up to 5,000%.
5,000%.
Right, when you take the monthly fees
Right.
and like they call them like monthly membership fees and other things, you add it all together with the amount of the loan, it can be that high. Most of the car title lending is 267% by statute, but most of these internet loans are like 300, 400, 500, 600, some 5,000. It's crazy. And so my bill basically requires the State Corporation Commission, Bureau of Financial Institutions to start regulating them. Basically, we had to do some tweaks to the bill, but it passed the Senate with the caveat that the BFI is now being ordered to look at it, come up with a regulatory regime, which will hopefully then pass next year.
Now, what's the BFI?
The Bureau of Financial Institutions
Okay.
with the State Corporation Commission. So I think we're going to see some movement on it. I had bipartisan support for it this year. It came out of Commerce and Labor Committee, I think on a 8-5 vote, 9-6, something like that. So people recognize that if you're going to lend money to people in Virginia, you ought to be regulated by Virginia. So
That $300 million in student debt in the Commonwealth is due a lot to the higher cost of our institutions in the state. Why are these costs continuing to rise?
Well, that's something we need to get a hold of too. I mean, I'm focused a lot on folks that have already graduated, but folks going in too. Part of it is we've got to have a renewed commitment as appropriators here in Virginia to support higher education with our funds, and then we also need to hold the institutions accountable for how they spend the money. We've all heard stories about some of our premier universities, hoarding all kinds of funds and lumping them together and amassing surpluses of $2 billion in strategic initiative funds.
Bigger than our reserve fund.
Bigger than our rainy day fund. Yeah. So I think it's time to really hold those folks accountable for keeping tuition down. The other thing is they're going to sort of this, I call it sort of the hotel model, where you look at the rack rate. So they're going to set the rack rate really high to try and get as much money as they can out of folks that can afford it, but then they start discounting it. So nobody ever actually pays that, but there's no transparency in that either. So what is the real tuition? What's the real cost of college? Shouldn't it be the same for everybody? So it's an effort that really Senator Surovell and some others are leading, but I'm involved with to try and hold them accountable, find out what's going on and with their books, and make sure that the money that they're holding on goes to benefit students and keep tuition low.
Let me make sure I understand this. They have reserves bigger than the state's rainy day fund.
Yeah, I think the UVA's reserve is, the rainy day fund, I think is around $500 million. UVA has $2.1 billion right now, so it's like 4 times larger than a rainy day fund. VCU is sitting on, I think, $1.1 billion. I think Virginia Tech has about $400 million. All the other schools have much less. And they claim it's a normal business practice, and I think most of us were shocked to find out it was going on. So it's out of control. And I've actually put in 2 two pieces of legislation about it. One, which passed subcommittee yesterday, requires any university proposing a tuition increase to provide the public with 30 days notice of the maximum tuition increase, and then an opportunity for public comment at a public hearing before they vote to raise tuition. That's one thing I put in. And the other one, which it didn't get a favorable recommendation at subcommittee, but I think I'll probably pass it at full committee. I'll see when I get there. Says that the rector and vice rector, the two people that lead the board of visitors, the supervising body at every university, they have to be Virginia residents. I don't care about the other visitors. These are the trustees for the
Right.
school. But I think the leadership for each of those trustees needs to be a Virginia resident, because I think one thing that gets lost by these people who get put on these boards is they, most of them are alumni of the schools. They love their school. They show up. They think they're looking out for their school. I think it's important they also look out for Virginians, Virginia taxpayers, Virginia students. I think it's important that our leadership come from within the state so that those people leading have that connection with Virginians. You don't get somebody from like California coming in and saying like, well, I don't really care about the
Right.
Virginia part of this. I just want this to be the strongest school that it can be. And so Delegate Steve Landis has the same bill on the House side. I think his is moving, and I'm hoping we can get those through too.
Continuing on funding, let's talk a little bit about how the 2013 funding package that was put together has proceeded in your opinion. I know there's the Commonwealth Transportation Board.
Right.
There was a set of criteria established to determine where money would go to throughout the Commonwealth.
Right.
I understand there's some disappointment, at least in your district. Talk to us about how things are going from your perspective.
Yeah, so back in, I think it was 13, it was either 13 or 14, we passed a bill called HB2, which has nothing to do with the other HB2.
Right.
But anyways, it theoretically established sort of what we thought was a neutral set of criteria for evaluating road projects. You considered, in Northern Virginia, a lot of it goes to congestion relief, economic development, safety, and environmental protection or environmental improvement. In other parts of the state, congestion isn't weighted as heavily. But basically, if a locality wants to do a road funding project or a transit funding project, they have to run it through this formula, and then they rank all the projects in the state against each other. And about a week ago, they just came out with the new ratings for projects in all of the state. And while they did recommend a significant funding boost for the VRE, and a lot of the 36th district south of Fairfax is benefited by the VRE, in Fairfax County, it was awarded about $100 million, or recommended to be awarded about $100 million, mostly in the western and northern part of Fairfax. Pope's Head Road got a slug, and some stuff in Centerville got a slug. But every project in the Route 1 corridor the Route 1 projects got rated 40 and 41 out of 60, which put them well out of contention for funding. And I'm very disappointed by that, because at least the people I represent, it feels like the northern and western parts of Fairfax keep getting all the investment and all the benefit and all the new stuff, while the eastern part of Fairfax hasn't had any significant investment in years. And so it's unfortunate, because you can't reapply for another 2 years. But I've already had a meeting with the Department of Transportation's leadership, and they tell me that next round, there's things going on that should really improve our chances next time. Part of the problem is we have these massive projects that guys like him are benefiting from, like I-66, that are sucking up all the cash right now. And when you compare the congestion on Route 1 with what's going on I-66, we can't compete with that, right? And so once these other projects are finished and completed and come offline, our project will start to rate a lot better relatively to what's going on elsewhere. And plus, we've got a big comp plan rewrite of the comprehensive plan for Route 1 right now, which is going to boost density. And once we get those boosted density numbers, our economic development numbers will go way up, and we'll have a better shot. So I'm hopeful next round we'll be looking a lot better.
So 495 and I-66, is that the I-66 inside the Beltway or outside the Beltway?
Well, my district is right at the intersection of 495 and 66. So I've got the crossroads, the big giant crossroads right near my house, actually. And I have inside and outside the Beltway, which means I go to a lot of I-66 meetings and get to meet with a lot of neighbors and folks that are very concerned about it. But Senator Surovell's right. I mean, that's sort of sucking a lot of the wind out of the room right now. And it's also been a high priority of the administration. I mean, it's a sort of a signature project of the governor's that he wants to make sure gets done. And so we'll actually be breaking ground on the inside the Beltway piece here this summer of 2017 before he leaves office. So, there's some political considerations that go into it. I mean, a lot of it's objective and criteria, but some of it's political. We got a ramp. We're going to get a ramp from the Dulles Connector Road into Arlington because that was part of the bargain that we needed to get 66 done. So they found $200 million for us to to build about 2.5 miles worth of highway lane miles because that was what was needed to get the deal done. So. I wasn't super instrumental in getting that deal done, but it is my district and it benefits us. But that's the way things happen sometimes. Part of it also is the urban versus ex-urban debate. And some of these formulas were rewritten even after the bill originally passed. They were tweaked to favor what they call anti-congestion stuff, but to free up cars to move from Loudoun and Prince William and Fauquier even into DC and the Fairfax suburbs more easily. But Eastern Fairfax and more of the older parts of the county then sort of suffer under those sorts of formulas. So transit improvements and upgrading existing infrastructure and stuff sort of lost out when you weight the formula in favor of moving cars back and forth from the suburbs.
I don't think a lot of people are happy with how it came out. I mean, there was $600 million to spend. Northern Virginia actually got $200 million of it, which is a third of it, and the rest of the state is sitting there going like, how did Fairfax, Northern Virginia get a third of all the money again, or whatever? But the reality is
we have 2/3 of the traffic.
We have all the need. Yeah, we have all the need up there. So
we think we only got a third, right? So nobody's happy.
What about environmental issues? There are always those hanging around. They're very important, obviously.
Yeah. So one of the big discussions we've had in the Senate so far, I don't think they've had it yet in the House, has been the fight over the Alexandria combined sewer system. And I think most of my constituents were shocked to learn that Alexandria is still putting raw sewage in the Potomac River. They have what's called a combined sewer operation, which means that anything from a toilet and the street goes in the same pipe, and then anytime it rains more than 1/10 of an inch, it goes right in the Potomac. And there's only 3 in the state, but Alexandria is taking steps to solve it. But they have 4 pipes to go into the discharge, and they're fixing 3, but the biggest one they wanted to leave alone for about 30 years, and that wasn't acceptable to me. So I put in legislation. The chairman of the committee sort of put in his own bill because he was upset about it, and I guess it was on Monday, we passed legislation giving Alexandria 8 years to fix it. They're not happy about it. There's 2 bills pending in the House and the same thing, and the House is going to act on it, and we're going to have to cross. But, most of my constituents think that, for example, in the United States, we don't put raw sewage in our rivers anymore, and especially in a jurisdiction as wealthy as Alexandria, we ought to be able to fix that. And so I'm happy we're making progress on that. We also have the coal ash problem down in Possum Point. Mm-hmm. All this stuff that came out from burning coal has been sitting down there for 60 years, leaching heavy metals into groundwater. And I've been talking with Dominion Resources actually over the last week now, and I think we actually might get a broader resolution of that. So you keep your eyes peeled, because I think there's going to be a lot more discussion about coal ash over the next 2 weeks.
Great. Well, thank you for being here, guys.
Yeah, well,
Sure.
thanks for having
Scott
us. It's always
Serval,
fun.
Mark Simon.
Yeah. Thanks,
Good
Woody.
luck. Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Cox Communications. Until next time, I am Woody Evans.